Going on YouTube, Cloverbells here, back with another Scarlet Violet video, and today we're going to be recapping day 2 of the World Championships. So, we're past day 1, all the initial stages are gone, we're down to our final 2 participants, and we'll take a look at both of those teams in a second, as well as the players, but leading into that, let's look at some of the results, let's look at usage data, and just see how the tournament played out, and in terms of like the meta, currently at Worlds. And again, all of this is still going to be relevant later on, when we go back into January, because once you hit January 2025, you're going to be playing this format again. So it's still important to pay attention to, the results from the World Championships overall. All right. Right now, I'm on the Victory Road website, but they don't have all the open team sheets from the players just yet. They have a lot of cool graphics, which is nice. But in terms of the OTS, there's a couple websites you can use. Right here, you can use PokeData. Which again will give you that data, if you want to look at open team sheets. You just have to click the teams here from the players. It's also cool to see the country flags. I think I mentioned this in the day 1 video, but I'm going to use the Star Roof development website here just because it's a little bit more user friendly, a little bit easier to see some of the squads just on the screen, especially for a video. All right, but before we even look at the squads, let's go ahead and take a look at usage data from both the restricted legendaries as well as the non-restricted legendaries, just so we see what was popular leading up to this point. Okay, let's take a look. All right, so here we go. Day 2 data for the non-restricteds. How about Urshifu Rapid Strike here? 61% usage. Oh my goodness, 61. I knew it would be like high. Of course, I didn't think it would be this high, like 61% high. But it just goes to show you how strong this Pokemon is. The fact that you can crit through things. Of course, no surprise to anyone. It's going to be up there, and it's the World Championships, right? Anytime you need a strong Pokemon, for a tournament, Urshifu has always been a very reliable choice. But has it been, at this high of a percentage? I'm not quite sure. But listen, 61%, I'm still not surprised. I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised at the end of the day, right? Rillaboom also, look at this. Rillaboom, 37% usage. Again, the difference between number 1 and number 2 is like they're almost 30% entirely, right? So I'm not surprised at this. What I am also surprised here is the Incineroar being as low as it is. Now, it is still within the top 6, of course, but I thought Incin would be a little bit higher than 26% usage. But there's a few reasons for that. just considering, the Clear Amulet item, it's on a lot of, physical attackers. Imagine the Calyrex Ice Rider, where previously, in Sword and Shield, you got to Intimidate cycle that thing, but in Scarlet and Violet, that's not going to work as much because they have the Clear Amulet item. Then you imagine the Cornerstone Ogerpon, which we'll talk more about in a second. But again, even if you Intimidate this thing, like, you're still taking a super effective rock damage move. And this thing hurts a lot, especially when it terras. So even with the Intimidate, it's still not going to like it all that much. All things considered, right? That being said, there's also a lot more special attackers, especially the restricteds, right? So, not so much use for Incin as one might think, okay? Which, again, it's still very good. You still have Fake Out and Parting Shot, and you still have a Dark type for the Calyrex-Shadow Rider, hence the reason why it's still top 6 in usage. But I thought it would be, at least within the 30s, but 26%, I am a little bit surprised to see that there. All right, Raging Bolt at number 3, 33%. This thing has risen a little bit, of course. Priority, whether you're in Trick Room or whether it's Tailwind, either way, it's great. It's Dragon typing, which means, again, you resist the Fire, Water, Grass stuff from both the Incin, Rillaboom, and Urshifu. And then you get to click an electric move into the Urshifu, which is also, a threat to it, right? So Thunderclap into Urshifu is very strong, of course. And then it's also pretty good into some of the other restricteds, like a Kyogre, for example, which is one of the reasons why Kyogre, even though it is strong, hasn't been as strong as it needed to be, in this part of regulationG. And Raging Bolt is a big reason for that. But also Iron Hands is another reason. Again, Iron Hands now within the top 6, 24%. And again, we mentioned this, in the day 1 video, and even in some other recap videos, the trend for Iron Hands was only up, after like NAIC. Again, it went from like not being used to all of a sudden being back to a top tier Pokemon again, whether or not it was used with Miraidon regardless. Okay, again, with Miraidon, you have the plus attack damage, And I used to always say this, Iron Hands was a Pokemon that, even without the ability, was always top 3 in usage in previous formats. Then all of a sudden you add Miraidon, and now all of a sudden it does get an attack boost, which means it's much more threatening. So even if it had an Assault Vest, and Incineroar were to Intimidate Cycle it, it's still neutral, and it's still a big damage dealer at the end of the day, right? So, and it's also really good into Terapagos, hence one of the reasons why Terapagos usage was not that high, coming into day 2. But at the very least, it's still very good as a fake out user. It's still great into Trick Room matchups, of course. And then overall, it's just a very good Pokemon, just to have, within your team, especially in this World Championship. It's super bulky, hits very hard, not too many reasons not to like the Iron Hands. Then over here, Farigiraf at number 4, 30% here. This thing was usually, in the bottom 12, but now we're in the top 5, okay? And again, anti-priority stuff, just denying Aqua Jets, denying Thunderclaps, denying Fake Outs from 3 of these options, right? Iron Hands, Instant, Rillaboom, they all have Fake Out. Farigiraf can stop you from doing that. It's another Trick Room setter. It can be aggressive if it has a throat spray set, right? It can nuke Amoonguses for that matter. So, Farigiraf, a great Pokemon overall in regulation-G, and even in other formats just altogether. The more Fake Out and the more priority users there are, the more use Farigiraf will always be, especially, in a format like this. Then, how about Ogerpon Heartflame, entering the graphic now here, and it's even higher than the Cornerstone Mask, and you might find that, kind of standard if this were like previous formats. Like Heartflame always had good usage outside of the restricted formats, but once the restricted formats came, not too many were using it, but all of a sudden it's now used a little bit more, especially on Miraidon teams for a few reasons. One way to really deal with Miraidon and mitigate some of its damage is to use Rillaboom and change the terrain. But then that just makes your Ogerpon hit harder because, you make your grass moves stronger, and at the same time you get to click a fire move into the Rillaboom altogether, right? And then of course when you Terastallize it, it gets an attack boost, so it's super strong. You have a chance to crit, which is great. You have redirection support, just like any other Ogerpon would follow me. So you can be supportive and hard hitting at the same time. So it's a good Pokemon to have. And you are a grass type, just like all the other Ogerpons, which means you have that Amoonguss grass immunity, which is always a bonus, right? And then Fluttermane over here, 19%. Oh my goodness, I've never seen Fluttermane this low. But times have changed. Again, this was once upon a time, Fluttermane was, top 3 usage, but in a restricted format where there's harder hitting stuff, okay, and there's a Calyrex running around, Fluttermane, sometimes just can't quite compete, but it's still very good. It still can, provide speed control, especially with a booster energy, right? You still have Icy Wind, Thunder Wave stuff, so that's always great to have, and Fluttermane's also pretty good on those Koraidon teams, regardless. But other than that, Fluttermane not as high usage as it once was, in a restricted format, but that's okay. Chi-Yu still pretty solid. This is what I expect for Chi-Yu, within the top 12, not really within the top 6. Fluttermane Chi-Yu is always still a powerful combination. And again, that dark typing, always good into the Shadow Rider stuff. It's also pretty good into the Ice Rider. You have to force it to Terra, otherwise it's just going to melt to either the dark move or the fire move. And then, with the Scarf, you outspeed the Calyrex naturally. You also outspeed Miraidon. You could Snarl it. Always good use for Chi-Yu overall in regulation-G. Then over here, okay, Ogerpon Cornerstone. Once upon a time, this thing was not used. But then because Sturdy is a really good ability for Trick Room teams, so, you'll see a lot of Calyrex Ice Rider use the Cornerstone as a nice support option. Because of Sturdy, you don't need to waste a Focus Sash on it, right? So that's great. And then at the same time, it does great damage into something like an Incineroar, right? Which is something that sometimes the Calyrex has a little bit of trouble dealing with. And again, Amoonguss immunity is always nice. And it's also pretty good into some flying types. Think about Pelipper, Tornado stuff. Ogerpon can do some work in that regard, right? The Whimsicott, of course, Tailwind user. It's your main pranks. It's now the top prankster Pokemon. It's been that way for a bit. But Tailwind, not just Tailwind, but the Encore stuff, the Light Screen now, that's a very common thing to have on the Whimsicott. And again, Encore locking things into Fake Out, Encore Trick Room stuff. So, if you set Trick Room the previous turn, Whimsicott's just going to Encore you, and then you get to click Trick Room again. Gets flipped, right? So that's one way to get around that. And, it's Prankster, right? So you get priority Anchor in that regard. And then at the end of the day, it's a fairy type. You can't click a dragon, move into it. So if something wants to click Draco Meteor, like another Miraidon, for example, or even a Raging Bolt, you can, time your Whimsicott switch in, and then all of a sudden the Draco just doesn't do anything, right? And then you have Boom Blast Pressure into the Raging Bolt, the Urshifus, the other Miraidon. So, it explains a lot. And then how about Amoonguss here? Again, Amoonguss, this is pretty low. It hasn't, seen as much usage in previous formats. But again, Amoonguss is still always going to be very, very solid. And I say this with a grain of salt, because again, Amoonguss is in the finals, okay, for good reason. But a lot of this has to do with Miraidon, electric terrain. You can't Spore. And, because of that, that's basically you're playing with 3 moves if you can't Spore. You have your redirection move, you have your healing move, and then you have Protect. Okay, so that's great. But overall, Amoonguss is still pretty good in those Trick Room games. Spore Pressure, redirection support for the Calyrex Ice Rider. But overall, again, sometimes that electric terrain can be tough to deal with. We know this already, right? But overall, I am surprised at some of these numbers. I'm not surprised at the 12. I'm just surprised at the numbers. But again, it still makes sense, all things considered. Now who's not here on the graphic, right? No Chen Pao. That's something that I thought could be here. There's no Tornadus. But again, I don't expect Tornadus here at this point in regulationG. Whimsicott has been a little bit better than the Tornadus, at the moment, at this point, right, in the World Championships. So that's interesting to see in that regard. But overall, I think Pelipper could have made this graphic, but at the end of the day, it's in the finals, right? So that's something to note worth, but I think it's in the top 20. We'll have to take a look at the Lab Mouse website once that becomes available. But overall, no surprises for most of these mons. So, now let's take a look at the restricteds and see if there's any surprises there. Okay, so now we're looking at day 2 data for the restricted legendaries. So here's your top 8 here. Calyrex-Shadow Rider at 23%, leading the way. Ice Rider not too far behind, but at 22%. Then you have Miraidon and Zamazenta, closing out the top 4 there. And then after that, you have Terapagos, Kyogre, Koraidon there at 4.72%. And then the Lonely Groudon at 2.83%. Honestly, none of this is surprising. Okay, even the placements. If you had to go in order and you told me this was the order, I am not that surprised at all whatsoever. I'm very comfortable, with this being the top 4. This was actually the way I predicted it. Okay, I thought Koraidon would be a little bit higher than Terapagos, but at the end of the day, I think that these 3 at this point is where they need to be. Now, what is interesting to note, as even though you see the Calyrex-Shadow Rider at a whopping 23%, there were no Shadow Riders in the top 8. Okay, and I will repeat that. There were no Shadow Riders in the top 8 despite it being top usage in terms of the restricted, right? And this is something that, we've seen in the early part of regulationG where, a lot of people were using Calyrex, but it wasn't really getting any results until later on, once it became really, really impressive and people figured out the good partners with it. So, now all of a sudden in Worlds, when you have the best players and they have, the best techs and they're very well prepared for the Shadow Rider, am I really surprised that it's not in the top 8? Maybe a little bit, but, not that much, okay? Now, the Ice Rider, by the way, this is in the finals. This is the Pokemon that I predicted to be in the finals, okay? And it is in there, so that's good. And then we have a finals matchup with Miraidon, which, again, we're going to talk about the 2 teams that made the finals in a second. But it's only fitting that we have a Sword and Shield restricted against a Scarlet and Violet restricted. How about that much? Okay, but at the end of the day, these are 2 very strong restricteds. I'm not surprised. Miraidon just does so much damage. It's very aggressive, especially with Whimsicott, Iron Hand stuff. So that's pretty cool. You could play this with screens, make it super bulky. You can play this with Chiyu, Blood Moon, or Saluna stuff. That's also pretty cool. Lots of different ways in terms of what partners you want to pair with Miraidon over here. Calyrex stuff, it's all about redirection and it's all about supporting the Trick Room setup. And then from there, just try and sweep, within your Trick Room turns. Sometimes Pelipper is a good partner with it, and we've seen that throughout regulationG overall. Zamazenta, can do well, with the right team. Again, just the Chien-Pao stuff with Rillaboom and Urshifu is just a great way to start. And if you were to play this in January 2025, that's probably the core I would start with. Zamazenta with Chien-Pao, Urshifu, Rillaboom. Start with those 4, and you can't go wrong from there. After that, it's Kyogre stuff and Terapagos. So your 2 special attackers not named Miraidon or Calyrex. Again, they both appreciate Tailwind. They both appreciate Calm Mind setup, depending on how you want to play them. Kyogre loves setting the rain for its partners like Urshifu and Landorus Incarnate, right? So, Sandsear Storm is now 100% accurate. Then you have to add stuff like Sereno and or Ferrigraph to make sure you block priority against the Kyogre, with the Thunderclaps and the Grassy Glides. Terapagos, it's all about like this protect the king idea. Sometimes, where you have screens and double fake out and redirection to make sure you get up your Calm Minds and then just sweep with, Terra Starstorm, at the end of the day. So great. And then, of course, Koraidon here, not too much out of Koraidon. But again, the photosynthesis partners, Fluttermane, Chi-Yu, Raging Bolt are expected. Sometimes you'll see Chien-Pao and Entei on those teams as expected. Groudon here, this is a Pokemon that I thought could do or could make a splash at Worlds. Because again, you get to change the weather against the Kyogre. You have a super effective ground move into Zamazenta, into Miraidon. And then the main matchup problem, of course, is the Ice Rider. And that's probably, why it doesn't have such great usage, is because a lot of the Groudon cores, they tend to struggle against the Calyrex Ice Rider teams. You want to partner, stuff like Fluttermane, Raging Bolt, and maybe even a Rillaboom, right? But all of that is like weak to Calyrex, right? So sometimes it's a little bit tricky if you're not in the right spot. But I'm not surprised that Groudon, trailing in the top 8 here. But overall, again, as expected, I'm not surprised at any of this. I was a little surprised at no Calyrex, within the top 8. I thought we might see at least 1 or 2. But the fact that there were none means people were prepared. Okay. Now we took a look at the usage. So now let's look at the squads. Let's look at the open team sheets and let's look at some of these teams that kind of stood out here. All right. So this is a graphic from the Victory Road website, not the website. I'm sorry, their tweet. These are the top 24 for a top cut. Now again, it's a little hard to see. So what we're gonna do instead is just look at the best 24 from the Star Wars Development website over here, right? And let's look at the first 2 teams. Let's look at our finalists, and then we'll look at how they got there and a bunch, and some of the other teams here. But it's Yuta from Japan, with a pretty interesting Calyrex Ice Rider Trick Room team. So let's take a look at this squad in a second. Yeah, there we go. So look at this. It's Life Orb Pelipper, okay, with the Urshifu Rapid Strike, which is Focus Sash. The Urshifu looks pretty standard, but Life Orb Pelipper, okay, so instead of something like Rock Helmet or even putting the Sash here, we have Life Orb Pelipper that's going to be doing tons of damage, which is great, right? Because you get to pick up some key KOs against, some Pokemon that are weak to flying types. Just imagine, Rillabooms with the Assault Vest and that much, Weather Balls into Incineroar. It's also really strong there. You don't need Life Orb for that, but at the end of the day, it's still like very, very good. Then you have Wide Guard support. So this way, that's good, in protecting the Ice Rider against, the Shadow Rider, Astral Barrage stuff. So that's nice. And then over here, the Amoonguss, of course, the redirection support, to help set up the Trick Room. We know what we can do with Amoonguss. The Spore Pressure under Trick Room is very devastating. What is interesting, though, is the Terra Fire. And we got to see this on stream, which makes things a little interesting in certain regards. You get an Ice Resist, all right, which the Terra Water does already, okay? And at the same time, you also get a Fire Resist, which also the Water Terra does already. A lot of people initially were surprised at the Fire Terra because usually this thing goes for Terra Water, all right? And again, it's totally fine as long as you have a niche for it and you have a role for the Terra Fire option. It's still like totally fine. I did see this drop, of course, to the Rapid Strike Urshifu, which, no surprise there at the end of the day. But here we go. How about Landorus with the Choice Scarf? I think this is a smart choice because this is good for the Miraidon matchup, which also made the finals. And we'll talk more about that later at the end of the video when we do a little preview. But, basically they're forced to bring their Whimsicott, right? If they want to try and outspeed the Landers, but then you have Trick Room over here, right? So, do you really want to bring a Whimsicott into a Trick Room team? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Most times no, but the Encore does make things a little bit more interesting. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But just naturally, against Miraidon, if they don't bring, or if there is no Tailwind, this thing outspeeds, and then you get to click Earth Power, or you get to click Sandsteer Storm in the rain, with Pelipper helping you out there, and that can also be like a little devastating. The Iron Valiant is the thing that excites me the most on this team. Just the fact that you have, again, a second Wide Guard user, you have Spirit Break. If this lands on Miraidon, good night, okay? That's -1 special attack. If it also lands on a Calyrex Ice Rider or a Kyogre, also good night. And then at the same time, you have your own Encore, which is cool. And then coaching, for either the Urshifu or the Calyrex Ice Rider. So, lots of support coming from this Valiant. And I do expect to at least see it once in the finals. I think Yuta has to bring it, just based on what I saw, from Lucas' team, all right? But let's take a look at Lucas' team here. If we just go back here a little bit, yep, there we go. It's a Miraidon team. It looks pretty standard on paper, okay? Again, you have the common pieces with the Whimsicott, the Iron Hands, and the Fraygraph. It is a Choice Specs Miraidon with Terra Fairy. Dazzling Gleam does a lot of damage into another Iron Hands, does a lot of damage into Urshifu, does a lot of damage into other dragons. And then at the same time, you have the Volt Switch pivot, just in case people want to bring their Rillabooms, you can just pivot right out and reset your terrain later on, while, dealing some big chip damage first. And then over here, again, Urshifu with the Sash, pretty standard. What's interesting is the Iron Hands here, okay? The Terra Bug, that's pretty good against ground stuff, right? Things that not want to take an Earth Power, right? The Iron Hands here. The Bug Resist is quite good. You'll probably see a little bit more of this in Regulation H, for Arkeladon, because Bug is also resistant to fighting moves, right? Which Arkeladon doesn't want to deal with, and it doesn't want to deal with ground moves either. So Terra Bug could be a Terra type that's more popular later on in Reg H. But for now, Iron Hands has it. Low Kick was kind of cool, and we got to see this a few times on stream. I think also Yuta... No, Yuta did not have it. Of course, he doesn't have an Iron Hands. But the whole idea here is that, even if into that Dondozo match that we saw on stream, like, this thing was doing like over 50%. Like, it's really good against the heavy stuff. It's also good into like another Iron Hands. It's basically a 2-shot, especially if you have the terrain boost. So this is really nice. I like this option here, for the Low Kick. Sometimes, again, it does do a little bit more damage than Drain Punch if you run the damage counts. So it just depends on what you're clicking it into. And with Flutter Mane usage down, there's no real need for the heavy slam. So that's okay too. And then Fraygraph here, the Electric Seed. Again, Psychic Noise and Foul Play helping out Trick Room. Very standard set here. Again, denying healing can be important, especially when the opponent has an Amoonguss in the finals, right? And then Foul Play, of course, could be useful into the Calyrex. Stop it from ramping up all those boosts, deal super effective damage there. The more boosts it does have. And then you also have Helping Hand, that can help. Basically, all 4 of these options do tons of damage here. The Whimsicott, of course, again, the Covert Cloak, no Fake Out coming out here. The Encore and the Light Screen is pretty standard, although I don't know how much Light Screen you're going to be clicking against a Calyrex team. Might be useful against Landorus, though, so we'll have to see if that plays a role here. But again, you do have the Encore pressure into the Calyrex, to stop it from triggering if they don't want to bring the Amoonguss. So things can get interesting there with the Whimsicott. And then over here, the Heartflame Ogerpon. Again, great for that Rillaboom matchup, but it's also pretty good into the Ice Rider matchup as well, especially when you Terra Fire it, so you get to resist the Glacial Lance. It's forced to click High Horsepower, which you can easily live, depending on the circumstances, right? And then you deal +1 Ivy Cudgel damage into that Ice Rider if it doesn't Terra. So that could be good. But overall, it's a really good, solid team, centered with Miraidon. So we'll have to see how it all plays out in the finals, but those are your 2 finalist teams. Okay, so now that we previewed the finals teams, let's look at some of the other squads and how it all led up into this. So just in terms of other restricteds, how about something like Calyrex-Shadow? Like, again, Justin Knox, at 9th place here. Again, we just want to point out, again, there was no Calyrex-Shadow Rider in the top 8, but you have a few here, within Top Cut. So let's look at Justin's team. And he was running Dondozo stuff, which we also got to see on stream, by the way. So welcome back, Dondozo and regulationG, right? And that you might make, and again, you're someone that has to make this call into Worlds. Hey, like, I want to bring Dondozo. There's not too many, clear smog or haze yet, unlike what you will see in regulationH. But so now's a good time as ever to try and bring Dondozo into Worlds. So here we go. We got Dondozo here. And at the same time, you got body press Dondozo. Oh, and again, look, the droopy Tatsugiri. So, makes a lot of sense here. The fact that you're getting these defense boosts and then you get to click body press. Pretty cool there. And again, Wheezing here. Very interesting set. Again, neutralizing gas. We know what this can do. And then Toxic Spikes, Deagling, Poison Gas. What a set, Justin, my goodness. We were cooking here. And then Rock Tomb, Choice Scarf, Urshifu. We've seen this before. And then the Indeedee Safety Goggles, redirecting Amoonguss Spore stuff. And then Psyshock and Trick Room. So I like this team. This is Terra Normal Calyrex-Shadow Rider, by the way. That's good into the mirror. So this way, another Calyrex can't click Astro Barrage against you. And then you just have Expanding Force and Pollen Puff here. So, Size spams Calyrex with Dozo. So quite the interesting team here. I like this a lot. Justin, you have everything to be proud of with this result. So I like this a lot. Shout outs to 45 Mice, aka Justin, for that great result here. How about this one? A little bit more standard with the Clefairy, from Ruben over here. Again, good stuff with Instant Rillaboom Ursh, Raging Bolt here, and then it's just Clefairy here. Terra Ground also, that's for your Miraidon matchup, of course. Redirect all that electric damage away. And then again, you have the Sing Pressure. This is Nasty Plot, Life Orb, Calyrex. Again, also Terra Normal. So that's pretty cool. Again, that's all for the mirror matchup, all things considered. And then 11th place over here, Marco. Marco Fiero, of course, who we know, again, one of the best international players. Another Terra Normal Calyrex. So all the Calyrex-Shadow Riders are all Terra Normal. And then you have the good stuff again. Instant Rillaboom Ursh, just like the Wolf Glick way, which we'll get into in a second. And here's Raging Bolt, and then Ogerpon. Heart Flame over here rather than a Clefairy. Again, similar structure, but overall pretty solid Calyrex-Shadow Rider team. And then, a couple more down here from Shohei, and then Mr. Wolf Glick. So what was Shohei using? Again, still more of the good stuff, Raging Bolt and a Redirector. So it's always this last slot here where you're getting a little bit of variance. So far we've seen Clefairy, we've seen an Ogerpon, and we've seen an Amoonguss. So it's playing the Redirector role to try and set up this nasty plot and then just deal a bunch of damage. So that was Shohei's team. Then we look at Wolf Glick's team. Again, the Calyrex with the nasty plot, Instant Rillaboom Ursh, Raging Bolt again, but no Redirector in this slot. Instead, we have a Farigiraf with the Throat Spray set. And again, shout outs to Wolf. He was going through an unprecedented legendary run. He was 9-0 at one point, right? 18-0 altogether. And then, a little bit of bad luck after that, right? But again, great results overall. I'm sure he wanted to try and win again. Who wouldn't, right? But, it just, things that just don't plan out the way you want it to at the end of the day. But still a very solid team. But just overall, again, the structure is there. There's not much it's not much surprises, honestly, from the Calyrex teams. So maybe that might be why they did not reach top 8, because all of this that reached top 8, there were some interesting tech choices and options here, which we'll also get into in a second. All right, so how did Terapagos do? So there's 2 altogether within the top cut here. There's 1 in top 8, Yushin Wong over here. And more or less, again, just protect the king. You have the double fake out stuff. You have the good stuff, Instant Rillaboom, along with the Ursh, giving you that. And then it is a Calm Mind Terapagos with Substitute at the end of the day. So that's pretty cool into like Trick Room stuff. You get to alternate Substitute and Protect over here. But otherwise, pretty standard. Look, Urshifu, standard. Rillaboom, standard. Instant Rocky Helmet, though. So, chip damage altogether. If you want to U-turn against the Instant, or if you want to click Surging Strikes into this, for example, that's not going to work. You're going to take some Rocky Helmet chip. And then at the same time, look at this Flutter Mane set. This is what they have to do now in regulationG, like we mentioned in our other videos. The double speed control move with Icy Wind and Thunder Wave, to mitigate some of that Tailwind stuff. And then help Terapagos outspeed some of those, common threats there. So that's one of the top 8. And then if we go down a little bit more, Humohada's team, again, more or less the same idea, right? Ursh, Instant, Rillaboom, Flutter Mane here. And then again, just try and protect the king and set up. Here's an Ogerpon Heart Flame, with the Rillaboom here to do a little bit more damage in grassy terrain with Horn Leech. And then Ivy Cudgel, of course, deals tons of damage overall, if you're able to Terra this. +1 attack boost. It's not a surprising team, but again, great results. But again, only 2 Terapagos, within the top cut. So overall, the way Terapagos finishes, good, solid, restricted, a little bit outside the top 5, I would say. But, we'll have to see what happens in the second go around of regulationG come January. But it's pretty clear to how you want to play it and use it right now. It's all about double fake out and redirection, set up those calm mines, and go to ham. Is that going to be good enough later on? It wasn't here, so we'll have to see the adaptations come January overall, if there can be any. All right, how about Zamazenta? The Shield Dog, finally, it had its chance to shine, throughout the format, and it did very well. And now, again, 3rd place over here from Michelder. World's finalists last year, a little bit short this time around, but overall, again, a pretty solid standard team here. The way you would run a structure as Zamazenta squad. You have the Rillaboom, Ursh, Chien-Pao here, and then from there, your last 2 slots. Sometimes you'll see Raging Bolt here, but in this case, we're going to Flutter Mane and Entei over here. So, Entei, huge damage that you can get with Chien-Pao, especially with this Choice Band. Terra Normal again, sit in front of the Calyrex-Shadow Rider, not take any Astral Barrage. Big damage with E-Speed. Of course, what Dragonite, Choice Band, E-Speed can do. Entei can do the same, especially when you have Chien-Pao still side by side. Sacred Fire, also really good. You can get a key burn. You can kill Rillabooms. You can burn Urshifus for that matter. So that's pretty nice if you can get in that kind of position. Zamazenta with the Y-Guard support. Good if it can get all these boosts, especially if the... Oh, wait, no, there's no coaching here. I thought there was coaching here. Not quite. All right, we have Substitute Goggles Ursh. That's pretty cool. That's nice into like Trick Room games where you have to, again, click sub and click protect. And then, with the fake out pressure, you can kind of stall some of those Trick Room teams a little bit. But at the end of the day, Wide Guard Zamazenta with Body Press and Heavy Slam. So, Body Press doing like big damage. Of course, you can get a defense boost immediately in the opening turn. But overall, just good stuff, surrounded with Zamazenta. Pretty nice, from Michelder. Shoutouts to them. Then over here at 8th place, not 8th place over here, 13th place, I'm so sorry. Diego's team, this one looks like a little Michael Zhang-esque, right? Because I can see Tyranitar and Latios. We mentioned this in yesterday's video, but again, Sash, T-Tar, bringing out the sand, which is good, into the Pelipper stuff. You get to break Sash from Chien-Pao, which is nice. And even Sash against the Urshifu too, right? And then Latios can exert pressure into those Urshifu teams. And then also pretty good into Amoonguss, right? Something that can bother Zamazenta a little bit. So having Latios over here can do just that, along with giving you Tailwind support, which is kind of cool. Again, this Dragon Fairy Steel Core with Latios, Flutter Mane, and Zamazenta. A little bit more speed control here with Thunder Wave 2. Shadow Ball on the Flutter Mane, something that they've been giving up, for the extra Icy Wind here. But if you have Tailwind over here, you don't really necessarily need the Icy Wind per se. Substitute Landorus, Rillaboom here. Again, overall, very solid team. Diego, shoutouts to them, got really far. The Shield Dog is in good hands, but of course, we got to give out shoutouts to our boy here, Mr. Keanu. Okay, top 32 result, the Pelipper, Urshifu stuff with Chien-Pao. Here's the Amoonguss, here's the Raging Bolt. A pretty standard Zamazenta Pelipper core that you can easily pick up later on in January if you really wanted to play Zamazenta. I would just use this. It's pretty nice to use. I like this kind of team. Makes a lot of sense. I like the redirection support. You have all the priority that you need from these guys. And then you have the Wide Guard here. And then, of course, at the end of the day, coaching Urshifu for the Zamazenta, which I like. I'm a fan of. So I like this a lot. So shout outs to Keanu, doing very well at your first Worlds run. So overall, Zamazenta, it's good. And it's easy to pick up later on in January. I wanted to spotlight Jones's team over here just because there's a Regieleki here, and this is a Pokemon that nobody was using for a very long time. There was that one result with with Volvo Max Ben, almost a year ago. But of course, since then we haven't really heard of Regieleki since. But let's look at this. So it's a Calyrex Ice Rider team from Jones here. Again, Trick Room stuff, Glacial Lance, Protect, High Horsepower, Clear Amulet, Terra Water. We know what this can do. This is pretty standard. Even here with the Urshifu. with the Mystic Water. I don't know how fast Jones ran their Urshifu, but I like slow, bulky Urshifu, on a Trick Room team. And again, Terra Normal, again, there's that tech that you can sit in front of the Shadow Rider and not have to worry about Astral Barrage. Here's the Foul Play, helping at Trick Room stuff from the Furgraph. Terra Steel, how about that? I haven't seen Terra Steel on the Furgraph, in quite a hot minute, but it makes a lot of sense. And then over here, you have the Aleki and the Landorus, okay? And it's Life Orb Landorus, Sludge Bomb, Earth Power, Sandsphere, Storm Protect, pretty standard. And then Regieleki, of course, Volt Switch potential, Electro Web. Again, all of this is pretty good, against like another Urshifu, for example. It's good into Kyogre. Of course, you get to nuke it and slow it down. You get to nuke some Miraidon stuff, especially in the terrain. Regieleki does a little bit more damage. It's a Sash Aleki, so that could be pretty interesting play, and it does a lot of damage. Like again, Terra Electric Regieleki with a Sash. You click Thunderbolt. Good damage. Again, don't forget Transistor. It got nerfed, but it's still good. Okay, it's still like a strong ability, for Regieleki. There's no Dynamax, right? So, Thunderbolt's still gonna hurt a lot. So at the end of the day, what you can easily do, with Calyrex-Aleki stuff, you can go Trick Room and then go like Volt Switch and pivot out into something like, either Furgraph, Ursh, or Cornerstone, depending on how you want to play it. But I do like Aleki on some Trick Room teams. I've seen this before, like, with Porygon, Regieleki, you just click Volt Switch, steal some chip, Porygon clicks Trick Room, and then you bring in the Sweeper. So that makes sense as well. So you might even consider doing that. Like, you can do like Aleki Furgraph stuff where, you stop Fake Out into the Aleki, stop Grassy Glide, and then just click Trick Room on this thing, and then Regieleki clicks Volt Switch, bring in the Calyrex Ice Rider alongside the Furgraph, and then you can click Helping Hand, Glacial Land's turn 2. I could already just see, plays like that. And then Landorus, this is good, like we mentioned, into that Miraidon matchup. Landorus is a Pokemon that we thought could do a little bit more and rise in usage as the format progressed, and it has. So, good to see Landorus here. It's a nice matchup, especially into like Miraidon stuff. So what you can do again is Electro Web it, slow it down, and then bring in the Landorus and, deal big ground damage into it. And if they want to Terra Fairy, then you always have Sludge Bomb pressure into that. So I like Landorus as a choice right now into Miraidon. And we'll have to see if this is a good pickup later on in January. But overall, pretty standard stuff. Like, again, I know the core with Cornerstone, Furgraph, and Calyrex, and even the Urshifu here, that's pretty standard. It's just the Aleki and Landorus, those two choices there, that really separates Jones's team from the other Calyrex Ice Rider team. So overall, shout out to Jones, great job. All right, outside of like the more common restricteds, though, there's two in particular that managed to make top cut here. There's one Kyogre team and then there's one Zacian team here. So let's look at Oliver's team here, because there is a Roaring Moon here, which is something that we covered a little bit in the previous day one recap video. It is Origin Pulse Leftovers Calm Mind Kyogre. So that means, redirection and double Fake Out is the way to go here. So imagine this, but like, Terapagos here, protect the king, have that Fake Out pressure to set up the Calm Minds. Even the redirection is going to help redirect all those grass and electric moves away using the Amoonguss here. So set up those Calm Minds, outbook everything, then use, your physical damage reduction here, with the Instant Intimidate along with Will-O-Wisp stuff and Parting Shot. That's good. The Tailwind is coming from the Roaring Moon, and this is, again, an interesting choice, maybe into like this Shadow Rider matchup. Again, just having that Dark type that can click Knockoff at the end of the day. Acrobatics, also pretty good into another Rillaboom, another Urshifu for that matter. It's also pretty good into something like Serena for that matter, and even other Amoonguss. So especially, with Terra Flying here. So Terra Flying, Acrobatics, you use that boost energy. This thing does a ton of damage. So, this could be a force later on in January, but we'll have to see. But overall, shout outs to Oliver, great run. Again, it's just all about the good stuff. Double Fake Out, set up this Calm Mind, and then here's your Tailwind user. Instead of a Tornadus, we have a Roaring Moon here. So that's good. And then how about the Zacian team? Again, Grant, who we've had as a guest on the channel before. It's the Regidrago Zacian team. So shout out to Grant for taking Zacian as far as it got. Terra Ground here. Aggressive idea with Whimsicott with Regidrago. Here's your Dragon Fairy Steel Core. Nuke things with Dragon Energy. And then at the same time, clean up with Zacian. Maybe give yourself a second restricted with the Ditto in the back with the Scarf. How about that? And then Chiyu here, along with Sunny Day, change the weather against those Pelipper teams, and then just nuke stuff, with Heat Wave and the Sun. So that's pretty cool overall. And then, of course, Amoonguss here for that Trick Room matchup. Help protect the Regidrago and the Zacian, all things considered. So shout outs to both of them, for taking some of the lesser restricteds as far as they have gotten. All right, how about a little section in the video for the prediction-wise as we head into the finals tomorrow. So this is for Masters final, of course. Again, we previewed both teams already. Yuta from Japan and Luca from Italy. So what do I think? Well, look, we've got Calyrex Trick Room stuff. And then there's, Whimsicott Tailwind stuff with Miraidon. But there's also the Ferrograph with Trick Room here too. So it's going to be interesting. Now, at first glance, I think Yuta might have to find a way to get the Landers involved here. And maybe even along with the Iron Valiant somehow. Because again, Landers, Choice Scarf, you get to outspeed the Miraidon here and put tons of pressure into the Miraidon and the Iron Hands. So that might make you think, okay, well, maybe I might want to bring the Whimsicott here, set up Light Screen, and maybe give myself Tailwind so my Miraidon outspeeds and I can click something like Dazzling Gleam, for example, right? So that could be the case, sure. But do you really want to click Tailwind into like Calyrex going for Trick Room? So it's all about position here, okay? Does Yuta bring the Amoonguss? Okay, it's a Miraidon team, so you can't click Spore. You still can redirect with Rage Powder, but there's no Protect on your own Amoonguss, so that's interesting to note. So maybe the Amoonguss might not come here, but, it's just, does the Landorus come with the Calyrex in the lead? Okay, that's something to consider there. And then at the same time, but how do you get up your Trick Room safely? That's the first question that Yuta has to ask himself. Like, how do I try to get up Trick Room safely? Do I need to bring the Amoonguss and just, have it be a bulky redirector in that, and then try and set up that way, right? Or maybe I can Terra Grass in front of the Miraidon and not have to really worry so much about the electric nuke at the end of the day, right? So, maybe we play that kind of game. Or do we use Wide Guard support and say, you know what, you're not clicking Dazzling Gleam, and then, you have to click something else, right? And then be locked into Dazzling Gleam while my Pelipper just clicks Wide Guard. So it's going to be interesting. And then maybe the Iron Valiant, right? Look how interesting Iron Valiant looks here. You have a super effective fairy move here, super effective fairy move here, super effective fairy move here. These things are forced to Terra. They don't want to, especially Miraidon does not want to take a Spirit Break. So that's something else to consider. And then at the same time, you can coach your Iron Valiant, make your Calyrex hit hard and make it bulky, especially against the Ogerpon and the Iron Hands, which can do quite some damage into the Ice Rider itself. But if it has a coaching defense boost, then these options are not going to do as much as one would like. Okay, so that's something to also consider at this. And then it also gets Wide Guard here, right? So that's what I'm thinking from Yuta. Like, can I get Trick Room up safely? And let's see what happens. And again, Whimsicott does have Encore here, so you can do that. You can Encore like the Calyrex, but the Ferrograph also has Trick Room here. And then, if it does get a coaching boost, then you can also foul play it, and then also resist that Glacial Lance. So maybe it is a Ferrograph game, for Luca on one side. And then at the same time, look, you've got Iron Hands here. You've got the Fake Out pressure, which is good for a lot of this Pokemon here. Look, no Protect here, no Protect here, no Protect here, no Protect here. Okay, and then, okay, these guys got Protect. So, but again, 4 of these mons don't have Protect. So, Fake Out going to be quite valuable here. So I still think you do have to bring the Iron Hands with the Miraidon, of course. It's just, what other 2 options do you want to bring with these 2? Okay, is it going to be Ferrograph? And will it be the Ogerpon Heart Flame? Will it be these 4? And then maybe you leave these 2 behind. It's tricky, right? At the same time, what do you have for the Landers if they do bring it? You do have the Ursh. Okay, you do have some way to deal with it. It's just, it's the speed with the Choice Scarf does make a difference. And you just have to wonder what Whimsicott's role can be, in that set there. So that's my take here. And then again, the Terra Bug here, this is also very important for that Landorus here, right? The fact that you can resist that ground move and live. So that's also a key there. But then that means you don't tear the Miraidon. And, again, susceptible to the Glacial Lance. So it's going to be tough. But again, my pick at the end of the day, I'm going to pick Yuta here. I think he squeezes it out here with the Calyrex Ice Rider. I'm going to say 2-0. Okay, that's going to be my prediction there. I think the Landers can be quite the game changer here if Utah can position this properly. I think it's it's interesting against the rest of this team. But we'll see how Luka deals with that. All right, but that's my pick there. I'm gonna say Calyrex Ice 2-0. No game 3 needed for Utah, and then we get another Japan World Champion here. All right, but then, again, let me know what you think of day 2. Let me know who you think could win the finals. All right, we'll also do a finals recap. Once a winner has been crowned. So stay tuned for that video, and then it's back to regulation H. All right, so we'll be back with another video in the next one. Of course, peace out and have a good one.